Yes. Wait, I was just joking. Let me explain. So to really understand this question, we must first look at the different types of SV maps. When someone complains about an SV being in a specific map, they're usually referring to one type of SV map, and not the others. So I think the distinction should be made clear. And before you guys say something like, oh, you don't have to play the map if you don't like it, or a skill issue, or whatever, from the perspective of a score farmer, every ranked map should have some blanket level of playability, regardless of the difficulty, and anything that greatly deviates from that should probably go into the left section. Some maps have VPM changes that slow certain sections of the song, and thus the scroll speed. With other songs, the tempo might remain the same, but it's a bit more quiet or toned down part of the song, so slowing the scroll speed fits those moments. With these, most people are generally okay with it. If you've listened to the song once or are paying enough attention, it's relatively easy to catch when it's going to happen, and the scroll speed remains constant during these sections, so you can get used to it. If you struggle reading scroll speeds lower than the one you're used to, a trick I like to use is focusing my eyes at the lower half of the screen, or even looking at each exact note, or row of notes as they come down. This is especially useful for higher key counts when it's a bit more spread out and there's a lot of information to take in at once. When the scroll speed picks back up, it can be done in a gradual or instant way, so pay attention to the music to understand when the drop is going to happen. Sometimes the slowdown can happen at the end of the song, and this is usually because the song has a descending tempo. This isn't caused by the mapper using an SV change, but the slowing scroll speed can be negated with an SV, so my annoyance only really comes from older maps that have not implemented this quality of life idea. Think about playing through an entire map maintaining 100% accuracy, all for the ending to abruptly slow down in the most inconsistent and unpredictable way. It's so lame. A style of SV maps found in a lot of ranked anime songs, notably from Amici and Shadow, are these types of drops that occur right at the start or end of the key time. Basically, right before the main part of the song, the notes will either speed up or slow down by a lot. Most of the times, these happen so sudden that you're really not going to be able to hit them, unless you've played the map previously or are already very familiar with the song. I'm really not a fan of these. It really feels like a lot of the time, the entire difficulty of the map boils down to memorizing these 1 or 2 moments. And it's not exactly fun trying or expecting to set a score from the perceived difficulty of the rest of the map. This is something that I'll get into later in the video. But really, these just feel out of place and don't necessarily add anything of value to the map, so they might as well not even be present. There are some maps that have SV changes throughout the entirety of it, but they're not too extreme and they're still readable. A good example of this would be Black or White, mapped by Decade and Usagi. This is one of the times where the SV really complements the entire map's experience as a whole. The song has intensity and even some chill parts, and the SV does a fantastic way of representing that, as well as the epic story void. I honestly feel like most maps that utilize SV should strive to be done this well, where it really feels like the presence of SV is serving a purpose on the map, outside of just making it difficult and isn't lazily done. There are some more extreme SV maps that have more abrupt changes more frequently throughout the map, but these ones are generally lower in star rating, so they're inoffensive. You can really just play the map a few times, even with HR, and you'll be able to set a score you want. The easier difficulty means that you would in theory be able to react to the changes more easily and not make many mistakes, although this also means that each mistake you do make will be weighed more in the overall score, so be aware of that. Sometimes the SV doesn't quite match the implied difficulty of the map though. A good example would be Music Like This and Mayday. It really doesn't make any sense to have such SV in maps lower than 2 stars. There's even ranking criteria rules about this, but in a technical way these are considered hard difficulties, so they're allowed to get away with it. I'm gonna be honest, no new player is looking directly at the difficulty name to determine which maps to play. They're looking at the star rating, and when a 1 or 2 star difficulty has a perceived difficulty of a 4 star, it just feels awful. And I know the ranking criteria doesn't have any rules or guidelines about the star rating number, but mappers should really have some sort of consideration about this. Otherwise, these types of maps can go into left if people actually like playing them. On the higher difficulty side of things, there's some SV maps where it just seems like the whole point is to make the map unplayable as possible. These maps have some of the lowest beat map ratings on OSU, and the lowest scores set, even compared to 10k maps. I can understand wanting to express your creativity and make maps that you like, but maps are meant to be played and not just look good in the editor. What's the point of making a map when only 16 people bother setting a score on it? And it's not exactly even a skill thing. I think there should be a distinction made between actual skill, which can be translated on a map-to-map basis, and just memorizing a map, which would only apply to that one sequence. Granted, memorization itself can be considered a skill, but that's not what I'm talking about. Either way, it just seems weird. Lastly, there's SV maps that are a bit more gimmicky and complement the music well, and are reflective of the map's implied difficulty. My favorite example of this would be One Way Street. It's got SV throughout most of the map, the difficulty is on the higher side, and it's done well in a way that really adds to the map. There is a bit of memorization component to it, but mostly just about memorizing when certain sequences of SV are about to occur. If you're a decently skilled player, you can probably set an S score with a sight read. Another example would be this map. I'm not exactly sure if it's because I heard this song so many times, but the SV seems like it's done in a way that you can anticipate what's about to happen. For more extreme gimmicky maps, these are usually found in the loved or graveyard section, and since they don't exactly have an effect on the global ranking, besides score and such, mappers expressing full creative liberties aren't much of an issue here. Anyway, that's all the different types I could think of. As you can see, it really just depends on what your expectations are going into a map, and your own personal preference of challenge and playability that you find acceptable within ranked maps. If you couldn't tell, this video was just an excuse for me to complain about some SV maps that I can't set scores on. Overall, I think there's only about a handful of maps that I actually have issues with. There's just so many ranked maps at this point that you really can't expect to be able to SS all of them first try or whatever. If you're a mapper who uses SV often, or maybe a player that plays many different types of maps, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd like to hear their perspective of some of these more artistic styled mappers. Hyperbole. Hyperbole.